Por acaso o nosso também não está famoso. O nosso está claro. A nossa aqui não interessa.
Olha, para começarmos a sério, começamos daqui a um minuto.
Não, deixa dar mais 2 minutos. Olha, como é que fazem? Eles ativam isto, é? Ativam o nosso.
Sim, nós avisamos. Hello to you all. Thank you. I would like you to sit wherever you like. We'll be starting in a few seconds the presentation. Acho que sim.
Well, good afternoon. Welcome to this masterclass about port wine and Douro, especially focused on Douro Valley, innovation through legacy. My name is Manuel Lima. I'm the head of the tasting chamber or tasting committee at the Porto Douro Wine Institute. And
my name is Paulo Russell Pinto. I am a member of the tasting chamber also, so a great time of the day. Manuel is my boss, but I am also a wine educator and I work in the communication department of IVDP.
Well, sometimes when people know that we are part of the tasting committee of the Porto Douro Wine Institute, they say you have the best job in the world. Maybe not because of the salary, but of course it's a privilege to be on this part of the process that is tasting all the wines before being commercialized as port wine or Douro still wine. So we are in the part of the certification of the wines from the Douro de Market region. So I believe it's a great privilege, and thank you for coming for this session. What our goal in this session is to talk about the Douro Valley. We are going to talk about some innovations that are part of the evolution of the region. Because we have a long history on the Douro Valley, since 1756, where the geographical demarcation and also the regulation was implemented at the time, and then after more than 250 years, we have big numbers in the region. We are, in the Douro de Market region, this big number, 70% of the Portuguese exports of wines with protected denomination of origin are from the Douro demarcated region. So this is a story of success, we can say, because maintaining this trend of increasing the numbers, increasing the business related with the wines from the Douro region, I believe it's an history of success. And this is, of course, the merit of the people of the Douro, especially. But a lot of innovations during the time were implemented and based on the validation from the work of people of the Douro. So that's why we are going to, the story that we are going to tell today is the story of this validation through legacy of these innovations that we are implemented on the region for the past few years. Well, the Douro demarcated region is a region that is World Heritage Site by the UNESCO since 2001. So it's a region that we are going to see some images that are very strong images about the region. But these big words, it's a cultural, evolutionary, and living landscape. So that means we are evolving all the time. But to evolve, to make this evolution on the region, we need to also respect what has been done for centuries on the region. So learning with the past.
More than tradition is the legacy that we have and we have to maintain.
So future and present with memory. So that's very important on the Douro demarcated region. So the question is, how are we going to innovate and where we can innovate on the region? So we are going to talk today about innovation in viticulture. This is a very difficult wine region because we have more than 50% of the steep landscape in vines in the world. So maybe 15% or close to 50% of the mountain viticulture in the world. So it's a very difficult region with the cost of production very high. So we need to improve and innovate on the vines, as we are going to see. We're going to show you some innovations also in the vinification process. So not only in port, but also in Douro still wines. And innovation also in the certification process, where our job in IVDP, how can we innovate in certification and the certification of and the control of the wines of the region.
We are also talk about innovation and creation of new categories. Especially we're going to focus on those that were created and are into the market on the past 20 years. That's where we are focusing with a region with 250 years and more than 250 years. We are only going to focus on the last 20. And also we are going to talk a little bit about the challenges that Porto and Port faced throughout the last 20 years regarding consumption, types, moments of consumption, and our clients. And in a certain point, this will also be related to you when you work with your clients in your restaurants. And finally, how do the port houses, the trade, and the ruling body, which is us, are communicating all the innovation and are communicating port as a product that has this innovation included?
Well, in the Douro region, I believe most of you or some of you have already visited the region. Nobody gets, everybody gets amazed with these fantastic views on the region. But we have some interesting things. We have a challenging here that is the cost of production. Very difficult to obtain profits from the region with this cost of production. But we have some opportunities also. We have different locations. We have from the Baixo Corgo, Cima Corgo, Douro Superior, some changes on climate that gives some opportunities based on the location of the vines. Also the orientation and exposure that we have on the region, and different altitudes. And most of all, we have diversity of grape varieties. For the production of port and Douro, for the Douro, we have 115 grape varieties. So that is a very big number of grape varieties that we have to explore in production the wines. So this specific diversity that we have in the region give us also the opportunity to face also, for instance, the climate change, because nowadays exposition to the north in very hot climates can be very interesting, because usually is the south exposition that is more valorized, especially in the north hemisphere. So we have some opportunities also related with the altitude, because we can obtain grapes or grapes for the high altitudes when the years are too hot. And this diversity of grape varieties, we can also pick some grape varieties or study a little bit more grape varieties that are not so often planted today for fighting the climate change. So a lot of opportunities, but not only for the climate change challenges that we have. We also have the opportunity to produce a diversity of wines in the Douro de Market region. Because if we think a little bit, sometimes I say that not all wines from the Douro de Market region are exceptional wines, but it is possible to produce exceptional wines in every style. Maybe not ice wine, but all the other styles is possible to produce exceptional wines. We can obtain very good whites for the early consumption, but also white wines with complexity and also aging potential. Rosé wines, some are more simple, some more complex, even some rosé wines with wood aging and complexity. Red wines, of course, is a region where the red wines are more present and more important, but of course we have simple wines and more complex also. Very good sparkling wines, because we have vines at 600 meters, 700 meters, and we can obtain outstanding sparkling wines also in the region. Late harvest wines, even with some botrytis in some cases. We have also fortified wine, not port wine, based on Muscat à Petit Grain, which in the region is known as Muscatel Galego Branco. It's a very interesting wine also. And of course, maybe the most important fortified wine in the world, what is port wine. So there is no much regions in the world with this ability to produce such a diversity of wines. Well, let's talk a little bit about the innovations in the viticulture in the past few years. I have a sentence here that was from the Visconde de Villamayor in the 19th century, and he said at the time that give the adventurous waters of torrential rains a suitable direction. So one of the important things that we have in the region is to control the erosion of the mountains viticulture. So today we have laser-based projects to define the new patamars that are planned or that are implemented on the region. Because we want a longitudinal slope, 3%, to allow that the water rains can make the drainage with an efficient way. Then we obtain this balance on the vines, and also one row of vines, but where the patamars nowadays, the most recent, are 1 meter and a half to obtain more plant density per hectare, to obtain more production, and also to allow the mechanization. Mechanization is a key word nowadays in the region, because we have lack of manpower to work on the vines, and then the mechanization is also very important. So we are improving, obtaining new ways, new tractors adapted to the job. And in these patamars, these recent patamars that are the state of the art today on the region, we obtain also the possibility to have the sustainability of the vines, because we don't use herbicides, because we have adapted these tractors to work and to avoid the use of the herbicides on the vines. Also, there are some prototypes to mechanical harvest, something that was impossible or unthinkable a few years ago. So we have some projects, and Cimentian Group, for instance, is working, improving every year a new way to obtain to have the possibility to have the mechanical harvest when it's possible. Also very interesting in the viticulture is the precision. Every year we obtain new studies, new projects that are related with viticulture precision. And in the region, I need to refer this project because this is a vine, Quinta Maria Teresa, very well known from Quinta do Crasto. And they have this project that is, they have geo-referentiation of all the vines, 22,000 vines that are with geo-referentiation.
Geo-referentiation per feet.
Per feet,
per
vine,
plant.
per plant. And they have also a field, and they pick genetic material from each of the plants of this parcel. This is a field blend. They have 54 varieties on this plot, and all this field is planted also with genetical material from this vine. And when a plant dies, they can replace the plant with the same genetical material. This is a way to reproduce or to maintain the field blend for the posterity. So this is a very interesting project because in the region we give a lot of importance to the field blend, that means to the old vines. And we were one of the first regions in the world to define what is an old vine. In the region, an old vine is at least with 40 years, and we can only allow to produce half of the maximum yields of the denomination of origin. And even the wines that are produced on these old vines needs to be validated in terms of quality by the tasting committee at the IVDP. So, and there is some other things on the specifications of an old vine. So this is very interesting. We want to maintain the legacy for the next generations, because this is validated by the quality that we obtain on the wines today. I believe this is very, very important. But we have high technology on the region working nowadays with drones, with infrared cameras, with robots that monitorize the temperatures on them and the hydric status of the vines. We have also normalized differentiate vegetation index to verify the vigor of the plants, to also to take the decision when we are going to pick the grapes, and if it is difficulties on nitrogen available for the plant. So there is a lot of information that we obtain today, and we have also new models with artificial intelligence that will collect all this big data, and the workers and the people that on the business in different perspectives, they have a lot of information to take the best decisions in order to have more profits and more sustainability, the point of view, economically the point of view. So this is very important. Also some innovation in vinification, because the tradition in the Douro, and very well, it was the use of lagars. And the lagar is very interesting because it's a large surface, and the must in fermentation, they have a big contact with the skins. We need to understand that port wine is made in 2-3 days, because after 2-3 days, we are going to interrupt the fermentation. So in 2-3 days, we have to extract color, tannins, compounds. So a lot of things happens in 2-3 days. And the lagars that was made for some decades or centuries on the region was used. We need to reproduce nowadays with new technology and, of course, with new innovation. But the principle of the lagars, the legacy that we have that gives so good results for decades or for centuries, we need to reproduce that in a modern way with the robotic lagar. And the COVID gave us the final validation, because we don't, there is a period that we don't have people or we don't have manpower to work, to make the human work on the traditional lagar. So this is, and the wines keep going or keep keeping the high quality, the high standards of quality made with robotic lagar. Even the silicone.
The idea, yeah. Just one thing, what is interesting about this kind of innovation regarding the robotic lagars, in the above picture we have a squared granite tank, and in the below picture we have a stainless steel square tank, almost with the same size. The idea regarding innovation is not to create better wines. It's actually to replicate what the human foot used to make, and all the dynamics that this group of men and some women at the time used to do. And this for us is very important when we explain how innovation is getting into the Douro. Not with the idea to make better ports, or especially on the top end ports, vintages and LBVs, because actually the trade already believes that we are making exceptional wines. The idea is how to replicate these wines without the manpower that we used to have 30 or 40 years ago. So in this case, innovation is the idea, or the focus on the science is to make the exact same thing with a different technology, I would say.
The cool down the temperatures? Yes, it's possible. It's possible to cool down the temperatures of fermentation and control the temperatures of fermentation. But the principle of have a large surface of contact with the must in fermentation with the skins is the most important thing. And even the silicone foods that we have on the image that make the same job, the same pressure that the human food made on the treating the grapes.
And those white dots are silicon feet, what we call silicon feet, because it's silicon preheated at 36 degrees. So they are going to replicate the temperature of the human food in order to start the fermentation at the same speed as all the 12 men would do in a regular lagar or in a granite tank.
Even we have one of the most modern wineries in the region, in Alijo, and in this state-of-the-art winery, we have the possibility to work 40 tons of grapes in one day, and with a lot of criteria in selecting the grape precision in selecting the grapes, and in a very hygienic but also fast way. Well, innovation in vinification. One of the biggest improvement I think that we have in the past 25 years in the region was the spirit that is used on the port wine, because the spirit is also certified by the Porto Douro Wine Institute. So the spirit that is used on the vinification process, and we have also a criteria in terms of analytical evaluation of the analytical and sensorial evaluation of the spirits that are used on the vinification process. And nowadays, the companies can select some different, or can choose different spirits for the different wines they can produce. All the spirits, I repeat, are certified by the Porto Douro Wine Institute with high standards of quality, quite neutral in aromas. And I put this graphic because we study a lot the type of components that we have on the spirits, and we can identify that, for instance, the hexanol compounds that give the more grassy aromas are decreasing. So this is an indication that the spirit's becoming more pure and more neutral. So the spirits, for instance, for a vintage, we want a spirit with more aldehyde compounds to have opportunity to have more fixation of color, for instance. But for a standard white or a standard rosé, usually we use a quite neutral spirit. All the spirits needs to be at 77%. But the spirit that we use for a white or a rosé wine, standard wine, is quite neutral to not burn the aromas, we can say. So this is very, very important, this innovation and the quality of spirits that we use nowadays. Also the innovation on the certification process. In the Porto Wine Institute, that is the public organism that is responsible for the certification, control, promotion, and defense of all the two denomination of origins, Porto and Douro. We have the first accredited tasting committee in the world in 1999 by this international norm, 17025. But also the laboratory is also certified, and we analyze almost 10,000 samples in 1 year. And we produce 200,000 analytical results every year. So it's a huge amount of information. And we have nowadays working a lot of information, not only for the certification process, but then study a lot about the wines of the region. And we have trying to do with artificial intelligence, for instance, based on spectra, to obtain prediction models that can help us in identifying, for instance, strange wines or wines that don't belong to a specific group that we expect to validate. Then our tasters. The tasters are equipments, and we are equipments of the laboratory. The tasters are very well monitorized, so we have a lot of information of each of the tasters, and I know in this day how each taster is related with the group. If he is more demanding or more flexible, and we can work with the taster. If in every type of wine, in every type of faults, so we have, it's like a football team. We can work
Specifics.
a specific thing for each taster, improve connecting, and to have a more homogeneous group when they work always in blind tastings. So
All the samples that come into the market are pre-tasted at the IVDP. So we are not doing by sampling. We do it by previous approval of all prototypes of ports that you find in supermarket or that reach your restaurants, which is sometimes is different from other appellation systems in which they only certify by sampling a company or sampling a part of the region. Regarding the IVDP, all samples that go into the market, not the whole volume, but by prototype, we pre-certify them, or we certify them prior to come to the market. That's why we taste 10,000 samples per year. Yeah, please. Yes, we approve what we can call a prototype, because the wine can be rejected at the end by some problem. So the company is not risking gathering 50,000 liters prior to bottling and then send us the samples. So we sample prototypes, we approve, and then we have another team inside the institute that goes to the company to recheck if the wine that was approved is the same wine that is being bottled. They pick samples, they bring samples to the IVDP again, and we redo the process, and they must have the same standards. That's the company's perspective, not us. We just approve. We approve the final product and the final blend, but they were going to replicate it at industrial level after we approved it. Otherwise, if we fail, they are not ruining wine. Okay, please. Yes.
No. Every company that, or every distillery that produces spirits for port wine needs to be registered on the Port Wine Institute, and then when they produce a spirit that they want to sell to the port wine companies, they need to send samples to the IVDP. We are going to certify that samples, that spirit, based on this protocol that I showed before, analytical and sensorial. We taste the spirits also. After this process of validation, of certification of the spirit, the distillery can sell the spirits to the port wine company. But the port wine company can buy for one distillery or another, depending of the type of spirits they want. But all the spirits need to be validated by us. And then we are going to check in the companies if the spirit was the same that was certified by the distillery.
It's the same
so
process.
this is a very demanding process also for the companies, the distilleries that produce spirits specific for port.
But port companies don't produce spirits. They buy spirits to distilleries. The spirit must have a viticultural origin, so they have to be brandy or grappa, marque. They have to be under the standards that we approved under the regulation for the appellation, the denomination of origin. So, yes, sorry, please. Stainless steel is easier to clean. From the information that I have, from what I was saying, or I said a while ago, the idea, the studies were made before to ensure that there will be no loss of quality by producing ports, or mainly vintage ports, in passing from the traditional way to the technological way. So most of the companies that were using these robotic lagars, they did samples prior and they did blind tastings in order to ensure. So for, I don't know, 10 vintages or 5 vintages. They were doing with the same grapes vintages in the stone tanks and vintages in the lagar, and they would sample it, they would taste it to see if the wine would have a different profile. At the end, they realized they didn't. So from that point on, they started to industrialize the technology that they studied in terms of science. Okay. What happened? Sometimes we have the idea that port is a very old product that only our grandparents drink, and I hope that for all of you that work in restaurants here, you have ports to propose to your clients, at least on dessert. But actually, what happened is that port is adapting itself to the new trends. And in the last 20 years, as we said, we will be focusing on that. Actually, we created new categories, and that's what we are going to explore. And after me and Manuel and I speak a little bit about it, we will taste the wine that is in front of you, because it's one of these innovations. The two main innovations that we had was the production of rosé port in 2008, which is on the side, and also the creation in 2005, so a little bit before that, a wide range of white ports, aged white ports. So sometimes when you study in the books, white ports are only divided by degrees of sweetness, from very sweet to extra dry. Actually, that is not the only classification of white ports nowadays, because since 2005, we can classify white ports, wood-aged white ports, exactly as townies, with 10, 20, 30, and 40 years old. That's what we did in 2005, because there was being a demand for these wines, very good aged wines, that the companies had in their cellars, but they were not using it. And with the boom of rosé in the UK in the early 2000s, the trade also created, the companies also created a rosé port that in the first times of its life was called pink port. So these were the categories that were created in 2005 and 2008, not only to adapt to the demands of the market at the time, and we'll go through that a little bit later on, but also to explore more the potential of the aged wines that the companies have in their cellars. But that was not enough. So actually, the last change occurred last year.
Yes, in January 2022, the port wine business, we have created some more categories, because we have
they were not enough, so we have created more.
A lot of old wines, very good wines, premium wines, that were classified as more than 40 years. So to clarify this and to have a distinction from wines that were very old and the ones that were very, very old, we have created this differentiation. So we have eliminated them more than 40 years old, and then we have clarified, we have 10, 20, 30, 40 years old, and then the 50 years old. So they are blends of wines of different degrees of maturation, and the characteristics of the wines are validated by the IVDP, by sensorial and analytical tests to verify if they have the characteristics of 50 years. And then we have created also the very, very old, that is more than 80 years. So they are very, very exclusive and very premium wines that are the very, very old. It's a privilege to taste a wine with 80 years. So we have the Tony style, based on the red grape varieties, and we have also on the whites. That's why the whites nowadays, we have this large range of possibilities also. That's why we have bring white port or colheita. Colheita, it's also created in 2005, or created, there is some colheitas, old colheitas in, white colheitas in port wine, but there is, until 2005, there is no legal definition what is a white colheita. So this legal definition only appears in 2005, and a white colheita needs to have, as the same as a tawny colheita, at least 7 years in casks. So the most recent colheita we are in 2023 is 2014. So, but very important is the white colheita. We have this one that we are going to taste is from 2009. It was bottled last year, so there is some colheitas from the same year that they have different dates of bottling. So it's very important for the point of view of the consumer to check the bottling date. Yes. Yes, it's also a blend, but needs to have at least 8 years. So we have to 8 years. We have to validate this by sensorial and analytical ways.
Yeah.
Yes, usually the very old wines,
Exactly.
they have wines with more than 8 years, and blended some ones near the 8 years. So at the end we need to obtain a blend with no doubts of this kind of aging profile that we have on the glass.
What we realized, and I'm also going to show some examples in a couple of minutes, is that there were some companies were releasing very old wines that didn't have a date, such Noble from Grams or Cyan from Taylor's, and these wines were not under any specification. They were only called very old, and very old only meant for us more than 40 years old, and they were much older than this. So we created a very old VVO to put these wines into a perspective and to help the consumer to understand what they are. If they could be a colheita from 1885, but that's a colheita, not a blend of several perspectives. So this is the new. We are focusing on this slide because probably for you this is important. The most recent change on categories, on styles of port, was made 1 year ago, in January 2022, where the trade and the IVDP created these new categories since 2022. The tawny and the white, 50 years old, so you can start finding the distributors and agents will probably already started to call you or appear in your restaurants with this new 50-year-old style, and also the VVO, or very old, which is a wine that under the regulation must be over 80 years old, or to have the characteristics of at least 80 years old. And this is very, I think this is the main focus on a learning perspective.
So the wine we have selected for our tasting today.
So let's taste.
Is
Quick question.
Yeah.
When you say 80 years old, and I know you said it's an average, but you also mentioned that it's more about the sensatory.
Yes.
So is there a law? Are you literally looking at all of the barrels and they have to equal 80 years, or is it more kind of open to interpretation?
Of course, the companies that produce are very old. They have very old wines, like I said before, sometimes much older than the 80 years. But of course, the final validation is by sensorial and analytical evaluation on the taste on the IVDP. So it cannot be a mathematical average, but they need to have the characteristics, sensorial characteristics, and some analytical elements that we can characterize to validate the 80 years. Okay, this wine is a wine from a white colheita, like I said before. It was bottled last year from 2005. So there is some years in the casks, almost 20 years. But usually in the whites, comparing to the tawny style, we have more lightness, especially on the body and on the palate. We have this sense of elegance, and the whites that represents 13%, 14% of the production in the Douro. In terms of port, we are talking about port now. So it's, of course, the red styles are more important. But this is our opportunity to show this refinement, this elegance, and that innovation that we explained before, that the port wine business can offer nowadays for the consumers. So this one represents this new generation of whites that have sometimes, this one is 120 grams per liter, but we have some whites, old whites, that they have much lower amounts of sugar. And when this is the case, and when we have whites that have lower quantity of sugar, sometimes the aging process is more slower because we don't have the cyclization of sugars so evident, so we don't have the caramel notes so evident. In this case, with the 120 grams per liter, we are going to feel this nuttiness, this caramel notes that is more present. But some whites that are old but more dry, let's say 60, 70 grams per liter, we don't feel that nuttiness so evident. So they are more elegant, more refined, more smooth in this intensity of flavors related with the aging. So that's why in this case some winemakers choose the small barrels to aging this kind of wines.
The appearance of or the fact that the white ports appeared in the market, it's a good perspective on pairings, because actually we were used to townies, which are wood-aged ports made from red grapes or from a red wine, which are usually very heavy. They start the Maillard reaction process, and they get very nutty and caramelly and coffee. But actually, when it comes to pairing, port put into the market a wine that is lighter, more floral and with more fresh fruits than what we used to see in the townies. From a certain perspective, we enlarged the options of pairing ports with food under a complex wine that it's still complex because of its wood aging process, and some, as Manuel was saying, caramelization or nuttiness typical. But in regarding body, regarding mouth approach, the wine is lighter and is more fresh, more citric to a certain perspective. If we think about more exotic fruits such as dates or dried prunes, that sometimes they appear on tawnies, but they are very quick. And when they appear, the wines are more heavy in body because they come from red grapes. So the aged whites, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, or even the colheita whites, helped us to find a broader approach to pairings. Probably when we started a couple of years ago on pairing, we would pair a dry white with smoked salmon, for instance. We probably now can pair an aged white with Gravlax, so in which we can push more. It's just an example, but we can push more a little bit of the food, because now we have a white for a starter that can balance a little bit the strength of a more intense dish. And for us, this is very important, because one of the things that we are focusing on communication is, of course, pairings, and not only the diversity of port that Manuel was saying, this enormous amount of categories that are given us by 300 years of history, but also being innovative, but also versatility. I think with ports, diversity comes with versatility. And that's why for us it's also very important to be here talking to you today in the perspective that port is still a surprise for pairing for restaurants like yours. And actually it's very versatile. You can pair it, although it's sweet, you can pair port with a lot of stuff. And not only sweet, also savory.
Yes.
Please.
Yes,
Yes.
it's the same thing for the tonies or for the other styles of ports, but usually on the whites, because like we said before, especially if they are dry, they need the aging is not so evident, so they need to use small casks with 550 liters, the peepers in the Douro, and it's more preferable to have this aging process more evident on the whites. But even so, we have to have careful. It depends of the style. If you don't want too much nuttiness, you want more freshness, more orange peel aromas, for instance, or apricots, or something like that. Not so the nuttiness or the caramel notes. So that depends of the style of the producer of nowadays. And for the matching, we need to know also the style of the house to pick the style that we want. So this wine, of course, one very, very important thing in the port wine consumption, and Paulo is a specialist also in this matter, is the temperature of service. Of course, we are now trying this wine not at the ideal temperature, because some minutes ago it was good, because we have this lot of care in the temperatures. But one of the things in the service that we want to focus, and for you, the professionals, the top professionals of this amazing profession that is to be sommelier, is to have careful with the temperatures of service. And port wine with 20% of alcohol is very important.
And 100 grams of sugar.
and the
It's
sugar.
also
So
important,
if we don't have the right temperature, sometimes the experience is not the ideal one, and people are not going to drink a second glass. Of course, we need to have responsible consumption, but when we have a port wine at good temperatures, we enjoy more and I remember a sentence from an Englishman that once upon a time said he was so delighted with the port wine that he was enjoying, that he said, well, every time we are not enjoying port is a waste of time. So
He was right.
he was right. Well, Paulo, you want to say something?
Yes.
The
Let me
green.
just.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, this is important question. Very good. Thank you for putting that question, because we didn't mention, but in this regulation from the past year, we have clarified what is a garrafeira. Garrafeira, it is Nipor that is the company that has more tradition in producing this kind of wines, and garrafeira, with the new regulation, is well defined. Garrafeira can be white or red, but needs to be at least between 4 and 8 years in casks, in wood, and then plus a minimum of 15 years in vessel recipient, demijohn. for
Demijohn.
instance.
Yeah.
So this is the idea of garrafeira.
Not only whites, but also reds.
Not only
1
white.
5, 1 5.
1.5.
15.
15.
At least.
At least. It's the minimum. So
the
4
minimum
to
age.
8 years in casks, and then plus 15 years at minimum in vessel recipients, demijohns, usually. Okay, this
Yeah.
is the definition of garrafeira.
Garrafeira
For-
changed.
Because
Sometimes
garrafeira, it was
if you
colheita,
studied Garrafeira 5 years ago, it would be 7 years
7
in wood
years.
and 8 in demijohn. And now it changed, so we enlarged much more, because the idea is to have a ultra premium wine for the numbers that you said.
Mhm.
4 to 8 plus 15. Okay? And also regarding, as you were saying, white ports. One thing that it's important to us is, let me see if it's some things that we were talking about come to this at the end, which is a perception shift in the last 20 years. The 90s, the late 80s, early 90s were very good for port sales, mainly in Canada, but also in the UK and the United States of America. It was a huge success, but in the early 2000s, sales were starting to become a little bit more difficult. And two of the things that the trade realized that had to change regarding, we already spoke here, but regarding put the wines into the market was the creation of a rosé port, the pink port, but not only that, to desacralize, to take out of the ritual the idea on how would we drink port. Port could never be chilled. It was an heresy to chill port in the late 90s. Someone would kill you at the club if you would chill the port or put port into the fridge. This changed a lot in the early 2000s, not only with the creation with a wine to be drink on the rocks, an in-between space between a wine and a moment of pleasure on mixology with the pink port and the white port, but also one innovation that was created by Wars, that was to bottle townies in transparent glass. That was something that didn't exist in the 90s. All the bottles were green, so they didn't have the ability to show the goldness and this towny side that is somewhat amazing and that we love, and that sometimes that also what makes us buy cognac or whiskey because of this golden approach of the wine. So for the first time, and this picture is very interesting and I use it a lot of times, we have a leaner bottle, so a little bit more elegant than the old bottles, fat bottles. There is a subliminal message on that. Clean or transparent glass, and also if you look into the picture, the wine is chilled. It came out of the fridge. So actually, not only one, but this image is transmitting us two subliminal messages, which is chill the port and show it to your consumer, show it to. Please.
The
Light strike has a fault. It's a good question.
It's not common. The reduction flavors from the light strike in the Douro, in the tawnies, for instance, and in the whites is not so common. We don't have problems, and it's very important to say this. There is no, for my opinion, probably port wine is one of the most controlled wines after the certification process. And we do a lot of controls of wines in the companies that are on the cellars, even on the market. So we taste wines that are bottled a few months or years sometimes, and this kind of flavors related with light strike is not common in port wine. We don't have that.
Probably alcohol and sweetness will stabilize the wine more.
And the ruby style ports, we are more. Are protected on more dark
yes,
dark
it's
bottles.
true. This is for whites and
for whites, but we don't have that kind of
on
problem.
rubies or LBVs or vintages. We still have the dark glasses, which sometimes you decant the wine and you can still don't know where the level is. Yeah.
Yes, one more question here.
Yes, please.
Yes. The port wine, all the categories, with the exception of vintage and the LBVs that are mentioned unfiltered, these two categories, the port, the vintage, the crusted also, and LBVs unfiltered, they have a very good cork, a full cork, and they have a dark bottle. They are prepared, they are wines with strong tannins, intensity of quality, strong flavors, and they have the ability to age in bottle. In this case, we need to have the bottle laid down. But all the other categories of port, they are bottled with the bar top cork, like this one.
Yeah.
So we don't have interest to put these wines too much time on our cellars, and then they are coming to the market. They are prepared to be
drunk,
to be enjoyed and to be tasted. So this kind of wines, even this bar top cork, this wine with 15 almost 20 years on the casks before going to the market, they are used to the oxygen. So once we open the bottle, we can put on the fridge, and in another day or 1 week later, the wine is going to be in
Stable, yeah.
the same or almost the same organoleptic profile. So this bar top cork, for the point of view of service, is very interesting because it is able to enjoy the port in different days.
It's telling you
this
that
kind
it
of
can
wines,
be reopened
especially
and
the tawnies
reclosed.
and the whites that are very old, or more old. They are more aging on the casks. Yes.
Depends on the cork.
Como se chama aquela
Durand?
Durand.
Durand is a good option for us because we can double check when we take out the cork, or when we take the cork out. If the wine is very, very old, of course, that's taking it with the thongs is the best option. But it's very difficult to make, and it takes 30 minutes or 20 minutes to deliver it to the client, so it's a very difficult option. Using prongs works for us because sometimes we protect more the fact that the cork can break. Durand is a very good option for old ports, to be honest. I'm not making any publicity here, but it's been a good option. Or if the cork breaks, just to decant it carefully. That's the good thing about an opaque vessel. It's that you don't see that the cork is inside, so that's no problem. One other thing that so the perception shifted. One other thing that the trade lost fear, we have to be aware that in the 80s and early 90s, a lot of ports, such as, not alone port, but also Madeira, and one other region that is lovely, but we don't see it anywhere, that is, I don't know if you know, it's called Marsala, disappeared. It's only sauce. Port trade got very afraid that the low quality port, or not the low quality port, the entry-level port was be considered a sauce, a steak with a port sauce, a steak with Madeira sauce, Marsala sauce. So there was a huge effort with all the trade and IVDP included, not to perceive port as a sauce ingredient or as a food ingredient. So we had a lot of effort to say, don't mix port with the food, but pair port with the food. And that's what we've been doing in the last 20 years or 25 years. This also shifted a little bit regarding mixology and regarding the world. The bar came in again, the bar is trendy, and actually, although port can be an ingredient for cocktails, usually when you use very good ports, the cocktail price also comes with this, also reflects this. So to the point that it's being an ingredient to a cocktail, but it's being used as a top-level product, the trade also lost a little bit of fear in order to work with another area which is not the service in a restaurant, but it's also very important, which is the mixology and the bar scene. And that's how you are seeing also this, alongside the packaging that you see here, you also see the image of freshness and the image of mixing something with a port, and also with the objective alongside with the other one, which is a pop drink, but we cannot move away from that also. The idea, although we can see the tradition in the face of Baron Forrester, and it's interesting that they put the image in black and white, but the idea is, of course, to rejuvenate the target of ports. That's one of our main goals. We don't want 15-year-olds drinking ports in binge parties, but we want people younger people to drink port in segments that are lower than 65. It's very, very important for us. One other thing that is very important that is related to the new category, VVO, it's this slide, which is the premiumization of ports. It's not the ultra premium. I don't even have names for this. It's the wines that are sold very, very expensively. The very low releases, low quantity releases of wine that almost all companies are producing. The examples that I brought today is from Wine and Soul, 5G, and also the Newport Lalique that was sold in an auction in Hong Kong. This is the Lalique is the most expensive port to be ever sold. It was sold at $111,000. It was an auction, of course. Nevertheless, it was a partnership, a joint venture between Newport and Lalique. But also these 150-year-old wines. The wine that was inside Newport's Lalique was an 1863 Colheita from Newport. And 5G is a very old port. We don't know the age, but we're pretty sure it's from the 19th century. 1820 to 1823, and it retails, if I'm not wrong, at 2,500 or... Okay. So, and this is why I'm speaking about this, because even for port trade, it's very important that we understand that the wine that has its stage, at its waiting period for 100 years cannot be shipped. We are perceiving Madeira is also doing the same in some points, but if the companies are willing to release these wines, we were used to a very expensive Noval Nacional, but we are very glad that now these companies are starting to put these ultra premium priced wines into the market because it's an aspirational thing. It's where the top end should be. Unfortunately, it's not for everyone. We probably pass it through it when we approve the wine, but nevertheless, it's also a perspective on marketing and a perspective that what port should aim for. We are one of the best regions in the world, and we are proud to say that we, on port, and also on Douro, but mainly on port, we have one of the best wines in the world. And I think with somewhat the Portuguese venture is always to be shy about it, but we have to scream out loud that we have very, very good wines, and we should not be ashamed of that. No, I thought it was a... Sales are being fairly steady, but the average price is growing, and that's what we want, to be honest, to increase the alcohol content. Just some final words. I know we are on the top of our time. Sorry. Also in communication. This is very interesting because we call it the spiderweb charts, and we have it also in the information of the IVDP. Imagine that we are talking to a French audience. So for those who work here in French restaurants, probably what your clients are used to is to know what a tawny port is. Like we had wood-aged wine. These are the sales of port in France in 2021. So you can say you can see by the spiderweb that most of the wine sold was tawny. So we have to have a communication, or the companies and the trade must have a special communication or a targeted communication in the French market. But if you look into the United Kingdom, into the British market, or to the United Kingdom, you see that the perspective is completely different. They don't drink rubies as much as the French, but they are very focused on reserve rubies, LBVs, rubies, and vintages. So it's a ruby market. The companies have to be aware that they cannot use the same communication as they use in France, even if they are selling to both markets. and even you, if some of you work in the UK, when you're talking with your clients, if they want a port, it's probably more sustained that they know more about ruby ports than townies. Probably it's easier to surprise an Englishman with a townie than a French client with a ruby. But then you come to the United States, and the United States, you have everything a little bit as the reflection of it. And you have lots of age ports, reserves, rubies and townies, and it's interesting that probably the consumer will be more aware of the total range, a little bit as Canada, although Canada is more focused also on ruby ports. But these spider webs allow us to understand how we have to intervene in the market and how we have to focus on the types of clients and the type of profile of the consumer drinking in the market. Also, sorry? Yes, please. Regarding China. Yeah. It's, I would think, I don't know. And it's easy to tell you why, because we do this for the first 20 markets or the first 15 markets. All the others are very small and they can change. If there is one distributor that makes a good deal in Australia, Australia is more difficult because we have direct competition. But if you think about China, if you have a good business, a good deal in China for 2020, it will shift the numbers, because China, to be honest, is not as big as we thought it could be. We invested in China regarding marketing for 10 years, but China goes very much into the region, into the name of the region, into the branding, and it's difficult to get into China. So China never grew up to the point that we know what is the profile of consumption in China, but we are aware that it can change. Can be tonies one year and vintage in the other year, depending on who is making business at that time. Okay? It will be generic for all Asia. Macau, because we had Macau, and it's different, yeah. Exactly.
Yes.
One
But
final
port
word.
wine is in 105 markets, so it's a global wine.
Yeah,
no doubt.
yeah.
But, yes.
Although it's like Pareto diagram, the first 20 markets get 80% of sales. One final word for one of the vectors, one of the ideas that we know it will make a difference in the future, which is tourism. 20 years ago, tourism in Douro didn't exist. There were 2 hotels and no boats for an evening tour. Nobody would go to the Douro. It would be difficult to get there by road. You would lose half a day. If you would get into Porto through the hub or through the airport of Porto, it would be difficult to go to the Douro. This doesn't happen anymore. Douro is a vehicle to maintain the territory, to maintain people into the territory by the time that they are not producing wine. We have more and more, the Douro figures, the Douro tourism figures are increasing, and we also feel that's absolutely vital. Of course, a good, well-structured tourism approach. It will be also very important for our economical sustainability. So at this point, I think it's a mix between science, innovation, and also approach to the market, that we know that ports is 300 years old. It's not, it's big, it shifts slowly, but the trade is not slipping by. We are very aware of what are our challenges and what we need to do for the next 20 years. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks. Cheers. Cheers.